Hello, Cloud Dwellers. As part of our ongoing Marketing Cloud certification review, we're back today to explore another question that has to do with data management. This time, we're exploring key practices when using data extensions. Let's check it out. This week's question asks, what is a key best practice when designing data extensions? In order to solve for this question, we're going to have to know a little something more about data extensions. Let's look at some basics. When we create new data extensions, we're basically creating a repository, a box or a container to put our data into. And what we're trying to do is create slots where different types of data points, for example, things like a first name or things like an address or a cell phone number, can be comfortably put into the context here. One of the things we also need to have in here is a unique identifier for the person whom this data belongs to. So a lot of times you may start with something and say prospect ID, for example. And then it's going to ask you about data typing. And data typing is very, very important because data typing allows you to then use different types of logic to ask the right questions to get the right answers when you're comparing data points to one another. So for example, if we're looking for something that is text, we can say it has this word in it or begins with this character or something like that. If we're dealing with numbers, then it's really more about mathematics. What can we add or subtract, multiply, and divide with that? And if we have something that needs to be tallied up on an ongoing basis, we would classify it as a number. Dates allow us to do date math. It allows us to come in and say, what's the distance between this point on the calendar and another point in the calendar? So you say, okay, what's the difference between today's date and November 11th of next year, right? So that's really what we're trying to do here. And there's also other elements for Boolean, which is true and false, and checking for email addresses and phone numbers. So it's critical that we have a right data type. But this prospect ID is also incredibly important because one of the things we want to make sure that we never do is create duplicate records. So if somebody comes in here and we already have an identifier for them, we don't want to add them in as a new record over and over again. That just creates a lot of mess. So what we can do is we can set it as a primary key. What the primary key setting does for this element is it forces it to always do, well, one of two things. It forces it to always be required, so we can't accept a record if this value is blank. But secondarily, it forces whatever this value is always has to be unique within our database. It can't be something that's already been used before. So we don't want to use things like email addresses, by the way, because email addresses can also change, right? If you were working for company X and now you're working for company Y, the email address that you previously used as your identifier is no longer relevant to you, and it's going to create some duplicate records. So we don't want to do that. And then going in, again, it's just a matter of coming and creating new values and saying, let's put in first name value, which would be text most likely, and et cetera. We go down the line. All right. So this is how we put our data in, and this helps us get back to our answers. So in this case, if it's saying, okay, A answer is saying avoid setting any data type constraints. Well, that's actually not what we want to be able to do. We definitely want constraints because we need to know what kind of data is supposed to go into that field so we can use different types of logic to work with that. So A is a bad answer. Let's not do that one. Answer B is saying always use email address as the primary key. And as I just mentioned, the problem with an email address or anything that might be variable, might change over time, is just that. It may change over time. And so we don't want to have something that we're going to have to replace on a regular basis because that ends up creating duplicate records. So let's not go with that one either. Answer C is saying define a unique primary key field to prevent duplicates. Well, I think that sounds like a really good best practice. Let's take a look at D just to make sure we don't have anything even better. And it says use generic field names for flexibility. Well, not so much. We want to have, of course, field names that are descriptive of the content that's in that field. So first name should say first name or something like that. So I'm not sure what we mean here by generic, but I'm going to argue that's not what we want to do here either. So that brings us back to C as being our primary answer for this primary key field question. To explore other questions and answers surrounding Marketing Cloud certification and mastery, please subscribe to this channel and we'll drop a new question for you to check out every week. Also, this question was taken directly from our new and free certification quiz featuring 125 practice questions covering the Email Specialist Certification exam. If this sounds like something you could use, simply go to blueclouduniversity.com and click on the Cert Prep tab to get started. Thanks for dropping by. I'll see you again next time.